In this video, I'll show you how to use a compressor, but first, you need to understand all of the different settings. So let's go over each. First up is attack. Attack sets the speed at which the compressor activates after the signal crosses over the threshold. So a slower attack time will allow the beginning of the signal to come through untouched before applying the compressor, whereas a fast attack time will apply the compressor almost immediately. Next up is release. Release sets the speed at which the compressor lets go once the signal goes back under the threshold. A release time that is too short can produce a choppy or jittery sound, whereas a release time that is too long can result in a signal sounding squashed. Now let's talk about the gain setting on a compressor. Gain allows you to restore the signal back to its original level before compression. So if you're compressing a signal by 6 dB, you can apply 6 dB of gain to bring the signal back to where it was. In essence, this is going to increase the loudness of the uncompressed signal by 6 dB while keeping the compressed signal where it was to begin with. Next up is the threshold. Threshold determines when the compressor kicks in. So if a threshold is set to -30 dB, the compressor will start working when the signal gets louder than -30 dB. Now let's talk about ratio. Ratio determines how much compression is being applied. For example, if the ratio is set to 4:1, for every 4 dB of signal that crosses over the threshold, it will be compressed down 1 dB. So if the signal has crossed the threshold by 8 dB, only a 2 dB increase would be heard. Only 2 more settings to talk about, so hang with me. The knee setting determines how the compressor responds once the signal crosses the threshold. A hard knee clamps down right away, while a soft knee causes the compressor to kind of gradually kick in as the signal gets further past the threshold. Next up is the compressor type. You have 2 options, RMS and peak. Peak compression will be more thorough, compressing everything that crosses over the threshold, whereas RMS compression will be a bit more tolerant and therefore less noticeable. So if you want the compression to be noticeable, use peak. If you want it to be more transparent, use RMS. Now let's talk about the sidechain. This enables you to fine-tune exactly what triggers the gate to open. Self-keyed refers to the same signal that you're working on, but you can also set the compressor to activate based on another signal. And there's even the ability to set a certain frequency placement that triggers the compressor. The last compressor setting on this mixer is the parallel path. This enables you to mix the uncompressed signal with the compressed signal. So dry refers to the uncompressed signal. Wet refers to the compressed signal. Now in the audio world, this is referred to as parallel compression. It's a common technique used to hit the sweet spot of a controlled yet life-filled sound. Now the question is, when do you use a compressor? Well, just like any other audio processing, never use compression just because it's available. Use it to solve a problem. Otherwise, just leave it alone. I recommend using compression on every vocal channel. You see, vocals have this wide dynamic range. They can sing soft or really belt it out, and a compressor takes this wide range of volume and makes it as narrow as you want it to be. But keep in mind, dynamic range on a vocal is good, so you don't want to cut it too much. You just simply want to make it manageable. You want to be able to bring them to the front of the mix while not having to worry about their power note, making everybody in the room cover their ears. Now there are settings on the compressor that will be the same for every vocal, so let's go over those first.
This is only one lesson from our SQ Mastery course. Unlock the fastest way to master the SQ at collaborateworship.com/SQ.
Set the compressor type to RMS, set the ratio to 3:1, set gain to +4 dB. And now there's one setting that you'll have to dial in for each vocalist, and that is the threshold. You'll want to set this while the vocalist is really singing out. So the best time is while they're practicing with the band, because if you single them out to sing by themselves, they're not going to sing the same as they would with the band playing. So while they're singing out, adjust the threshold using the gain reduction meter. This is that little red meter on the compressor settings screen. You'll want to adjust the threshold so that it reads around the same place where the green meets the yellow on the gain level meter that's right next to it. During the quiet moments, it may not register at all. That's okay. You just want it to be compressing the vocal down about 6 dB whenever they're really singing out. Keep in mind, if you compress more than this, the vocal really starts to sound lifeless and smashed. So if you start to notice the vocal losing its shine, the first place to check is the compressor. Now that you know how to use a compressor on vocals, you'll also need to use a compressor on your instruments. I've included a compressor settings cheat sheet below to get you started.